to the 20th episode of Viper Voices. Very pleased to be joined by, General Manager of the Edmonton Oilers, longtime GM with the Detroit Red Wings, and Vernon product, Ken Holland. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Very nice to be with you.
It's not every day you happen to have a chance run in Vernon during the off season, but we happen to run into each other, and I couldn't think of a better person to be on the 20th episode. Not a lot of people know that you're a Vernon guy. Sort of talk us through what it was like growing up in this community.
Well, it was fabulous. I was born and raised here in Vernon, 23rd Street, which was the old Vernon Civic Arena. It was probably 8-10 blocks walk. Now, usually my dad drove me, got hockey equipment and stuff, but small town, you knew lots of people. In the summertime, I played baseball. My dad was involved in baseball. He would be manager of divisions, and in the wintertime, I played hockey. And I remember when I was young, I'm going to say 6 to 9 years old, my dad would be in charge of, say, the Pee Wee division, and he'd get all the ice slots in August, and I'd come flying down the stairs, and he'd be downstairs, and have his little book out, and 1 versus 8, and 2 versus 7, and 1:15, and 2:45, and probably my first glimpse at really managing and organizing. My dad was always, as I went through Pee Wee hockey, Bantam hockey, midget hockey, my dad was always the manager. He wasn't the coach; he was the manager, and would organize the people driving the cars to, if we went to a game in Revelstoke, or organizing exhibition games. So loved growing up in Vernon. It was a fun time. Great city.
You'd mentioned that, growing up, and this probably goes for everybody, you get a chance to watch the junior team, whether it's Junior A, Western Hockey League, it doesn't matter. You're a fan, you're a hometown guy. What was it like to cheer on the Essos at the time? And, how much, a little foreshadowing, you obviously get to spend 1 year with the organization, but what was it like what did it mean to you, and how badly as a young person did you want to be a part of the organization?
Well, I loved hockey, growing up, and they were my local heroes, the Vernon Essos, and I would go to many of their games, and I remember, Wayne Dye and Lawrence Kwiatkowski and Bob Gassoff and Price. I played with Kenny Price, I think it was, but they had really good teams, and I remember they'd win the BC championship, and I remember one year I think they lost to Estevan, and listening to the games on the radio, and they played, I think, split the first 2, and then had a third game, and then the rest of the series went to Estevan. I think they lost out in Estevan, and how disappointed I was that the Vernon team had been eliminated. So they were my first my heroes, and I used to love going to those games. Go with my friends and sit in the old Vernon Civic Arena and watch the Vernon Essos.
What age were you when you thought, hockey could be an option? At this point, obviously, being a player and junior hockey was the next step to where you wanted to be. Is there something that you can pinpoint where you went, I want to make a run at this, and I want to use my skills and hockey to get me there?
Well, I would say to you, I played Pee Wee rep here in town. I played Bantam rep. I played midget rep. And then I played a year of juvenile. I wasn't quite good enough to make the Vernon team. And then as an 18-year-old, I played on the Vernon Vipers. And Charlie Briskin was the number 1 goalie. I was the backup. I didn't play a lot. Charlie was really good. And now as a 19-year-old, Vernon was a farm team, or it had a relationship with the Medicine Hat Tigers. So everybody played for Vernon. We'd all jumped on a bus, and we went to training camp in Medicine Hat. And I remember, Dave Calder was a really good friend of mine, and Kenny Price, John Cocatello, and we jumped in a bus and we went up there. I was going up there for the experience. I had no aspirations that I was a backup for the Vernon Vipers. No chance I'm going to make the Medicine Hat Tigers. And I was there. Don Murdoch was on my. I was with him on the team in Vernon, and then I remember playing through training camp, and then all of a sudden some of the Vernon guys start to get cut and get sent home, and I kept hanging in there, and then it got to be a black-orange intra-squad game, and I played in the intra-squad game, and then I played a couple exhibition games, and then I started to figure I was that close, boy, I'd like to make the team. and ended up somehow making the Medicine Tigers and played there. And was an 11th round draft pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And probably that would be that year for me was the first year that I had some aspirations that I could play professional hockey or hope to play professional hockey. I got to the top junior league in Canada, and now you're a late round draft pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that was my first, certainly because of the relationship of the Vernon Vipers, that got me to the Medicine Tigers training camp, and then I made the team. So Vernon was a real stepping stone for me in my hockey career.
Small sample size for me. I've been here for about 8 years, but the fan base is extremely passionate. But your year in 73, 74 with the Vikings, it was the year after, or the year they made a change from the Essos to the Vikings. As a young guy growing up in Vernon, did you take any stock into the name change, or was that just, do you remember what the hockey community was like? Because a name change like that, it doesn't happen all the time. And for a fan base as passionate as the one that Vernon has, do you remember whether it was a positive change, or do you have any recollection of that?
Well, I'm glad you said it's been so long ago. Essos was a big thing for me. They had been the Essos, and one of my dad's good friends owned the Esso station. They were a major sponsor. I think that's why they were called the Vernon. There was an Esso station downtown on the street, one of the main streets, and they were a major sponsor. So they've been the Vernon Essos for a long time. So that's why for me it's whenever I think about Vernon, it's Vernon Essos, because they were such a big part of my life growing up. And then obviously at the age of 19, I've left here, and I've been basically gone from Vernon, for most of the year, for 19 years of age. So I don't remember. I remember that I was not an Esso. I'm glad I was a Viking. I don't remember a lot about the name change, but I do remember the Vernon Essos was a big thing to me. They'd been at the Essos for a long time.
You mentioned essentially being a bit of a backup role. First of all, how did you get into being a goalie? I love asking that question because what do they call them? It's a bit of a strange breed at times, the goalies. I mean, it takes a special person to stand there and get pucks ripped at you at high speeds, and what sort of got you involved in that position? Do you remember maybe that as a young kid trying to make your way? And obviously your brother, Dennis, was a heck of a forward as well. So what drew you to the position of goaltender?
That's a good question. It's funny. This is how old I am. I remember when I first played goal, I wore a helmet. I didn't, my first. I didn't really have a mask on. So, it's probably. And then I had some kind of a plexiglass thing, and I remember breathing into it and getting all fogged up, and I would lose. When I'd be a little guy, I'd lose sight of the puck occasionally because it was all fogged up in there. So. That's a good question. I don't know. I was probably 9 years old and put on the pads and seemed to like it. And I played a couple of years for the Vernon Pee Wee Reps. I was lucky when I was young because my dad, being so involved in hockey, I would play goal on the Pee Wee Rep team, and then I would play out on in the house league. So. It allowed me to skate and learn to skate. Lots of times goalies put on pads. It's different today because there's so much knowledge and information that, and coaches that they get on all that stuff. But it allowed me to improve my skating because skating is so important part of being a goaltender. So I don't really know why I took up the position, but I took up the position and I liked it. I remember one day we played a game in Kamloops. John Zahara was my coach, and John, I think he was the head of the Vernon Rec Center, but he really pushed us, and I remember we lost one night 11-3 in Kamloops, and on the way home I remember him and my dad talking, and John thought I had a bad night, and if I'd had a good night, we could have got out of the game 3-3. Should have been a tie game. So I knew I had to push and compete a little bit harder to help the team win. So John Zahara, the Vernon Pee Wee Rep team, all those things are they're important steps along the way.
you end up having 1 year in Vernon, as we mentioned. It was 73-74. You got into 16 games. I mean, it's so hard for some of us to remember. A lot of us, look at the hockey today and how fast and how skilled it was. And the game obviously has evolved over time. You have a goals against average of about 3.7 in 16 games. What was the hockey like back then? And what was your experience as a whole, in your only year playing junior hockey in your hometown?
Well, I remember, and I think Charlie still lives in town. Charlie was really good, Charlie Briscom, and I was a backup. But I remember, I was starting to get frustrated so I think I staged about a 3-day strike, and I didn't. About February, I got frustrated, and I remember Vern Dye was the general manager. He came up and met with me at my house, and back I went, and then I played a little bit down the stretch, but. It was, my recollection, it was a little bit different. Back then there was less 16 and 17-year-olds playing major junior hockey. They were playing Tier 2. So Tier 2 was a little probably, had more of those where those young kids now jump, they can go from midget, those elite kids, many of them stayed and played Tier 2 hockey. So, it's so long ago. I just remember it was really good hockey. I was in awe of those players playing for the Vernon Essos. They were my idols, my heroes. And then I got to be a Vernon Viking, and but I remember, the hockey was really good. Some of those players went on to play, major junior and senior hockey, and they were good. It was good hockey.
You end up making the jump after that. So the Vikings get eliminated by the Penticton Broncos back then. I think it was a 4-game sweep, if my research does me justice. And then you make the switch to the Western Hockey League with 2 years with Medicine Hat. Was it much like it is now? I ask a lot of guys who have either gone to the Western League and come back, or have made the transition between the two leagues. Was it a big transition for you or a big adjustment to go from the Vikings the year before as an 18-year-old to the Western Hockey League, or the WCHL as it was called back then?
Well, for me, I can remember being on the bus going from Vernon to Medicine Hat, and we got as far as Calgary, and I couldn't believe the highways and how far. I grew up in Vernon, BC. We've got mountains around, and that probably the extent of my travel was to Vancouver, the coast, to play tournaments, and there wasn't the Coquihalla back then. It was a 9-hour trip from Vernon to Vancouver, and all of a sudden you're driving on a bus and you get to Calgary, and there's 4 lanes, and you can see miles upon miles. It was flat, and I couldn't believe how flat it was heading from Calgary to Medicine Hat. So it was a real eye opener for me, and then getting there, Don Murdoch had played Tier 2 in Vernon for 2 years, and then he went the rookie scoring record for goals in the Western Hockey League was 63, and Don Murdoch scored 82 goals. He shattered the record by 19 goals as a rookie. Scored 82 goals, and the next year I think he had 88 and went 5th overall to the New York Rangers. And so I'd known Don since he was 16. So was it a step? Absolutely, it was a step. They were better, they were bigger, they were stronger. But at the end of the day, I'm giving an example of a player that played in Vernon and went on to be a superstar at the major junior level in Don Murdoch. So at least it was another step up. But I was I had 2 great years there. Made a lot of friends. Still friends today. And again, Vernon got me to Medicine Hat. Medicine Hat got me an opportunity to play pro hockey.
But I want to ask you about that. I mean, you mentioned you get drafted in the 11th round. I'm very interested to know, getting drafted at any round is probably a significant honor. You've seen it now on both sides as the man who drafts people and the man who has been drafted. What did it mean to you to get that honor. Again, going into junior hockey, you don't necessarily have, I'm sure you had expectations, but maybe not necessarily to get drafted. So when that happens, what does that do for you? And obviously, again, it puts the town of Vernon, who's had a lot of good hockey players come from there, puts them sort of back on the map.
It was a way different world. Like there was the draft wasn't on TV, so I can remember draft day or the day before getting a little nervous and thinking about the draft, and then I don't know if somebody called me or if you listen on the radio but I remember I was drafted and it was the 11th round, and I was thrilled to be drafted, and I thought, boy, I should be drafted higher, but the market for 5'8" goalies wasn't massive. So, but it wasn't like you were following it on TV or it was online. That was all that stuff didn't exist. So I'm not exactly sure how I found out, but I found out after the fact, and I found out that I'd been a Toronto, and then a couple of weeks later, a letter comes through from the Toronto Maple Leafs telling you that they've drafted you and you're going to get information about go to training camp, and it was a different world. But certainly for me, growing up, I was at that time. I started out being a huge Toronto Maple Leaf fan. And I remember in '67 when they won the Cup, Johnny Bauer and Terry Sawchuk were in net, and they went on. They won the Stanley Cup, and then I became a big Bernie Perrant fan, and he played for the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Flyers won the Cup in '74, I think. So but my original team was the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then to be drafted by them. And again, much like I can tell you, the very first time I took the drive on a bus from Calgary to Medicine Hat, I remember the very first time landing in Toronto, going to Toronto to training camp, and going and getting in a taxi and going up Yonge Street. I think it's about 9:00 on a Saturday night. There's people everywhere. It's 9:00 at night, and there's these great big buildings. I've come from Vernon. Like, if you're going from Vernon, you're downtown Toronto. My eyes were the size of saucers, just looking at this whole different world that I couldn't even had imagined. So certainly, hockey has given me some incredible opportunities.
I mean, I don't know the exact transition. So when doing my research, you ended up in Binghamton, and I've tried to look up the Broom Dusters, which is probably one of the greatest hockey names for a team that there is. But it's in Binghamton. You talked about the transition of going to Toronto, and then, I mean, now you're going to a relatively big market in the U.S., but it's an AHL team. What was that transition like for you? And for the next three years, you spent some time in Binghamton.
Well, I was drafted by Toronto. I went to training camp. They wanted to send me down to, can't remember who they're from, but their second farm team. And I was starting to get, I think, homesick. And I ended up going back to Medicine Hat. I played overage junior, and I didn't have a very good year. The Toronto Maple Leafs then did not invite me to camp. I got invited to San Diego. I think they were the Gulls, but it was San Diego's training camp in the World Hockey Association. And I can remember going down there. The owner of McDonald's, Ray Kroc, owned San Diego. I can remember that Ray Kroc addressed us on opening day of training camp. I was in San Diego for about 3 weeks, and then they sent me to Binghamton, New York. I'm down in San Diego, and I'm going to Binghamton, New York. On opposite sides of the world. And Binghamton at that time was in what was called the North American Hockey League. And I went to Binghamton on a tryout, and I remember having a really good training camp. Larry Kish was the coach. Larry Kish called me in a couple of days before the season started and said they wanted to sign me to a contract, and all rookies made $250 per week. But I had such a good training camp, he was going to give me $275 per week. So I took the $275 as sky. I come out of that office floating on air. I played my way into a contract, and it was actually a little bit of a raise. I played so good. So I made $275 a week my first year in Binghamton in the North American Hockey League. I was voted, I think I was a second team All-Star. I had a really good year. We had a good team. That was the same league. Lots of those players in that league were in the movie Slapshot. So that's the movie Slapshot. And if you ever watched the movie Slapshot, lots of those characters were from the North American Hockey League. And then the next year, the American Hockey League expanded, and it took on 3 or 4 of the North American teams: Binghamton, Philadelphia. Can't remember, so then Binghamton became an independent team, and I played as an independent player for 2 years in Binghamton. But I played 9 years of pro. My last 8 years were in the American Hockey League, and then after being an independent, I ended up signing a contract with Hartford Whalers for a few years. Binghamton became Hartford's farm team, and then my last 2 years I played with the Adirondack Red Wings, which was Detroit's farm team.
The interesting part too, at least going through the documents, you ended up spending 79-80 in Springfield with the Indians, and then back to Binghamton, I imagine. But you did get one NHL game under your belt in 80-81 with the Whalers. Again, they don't have wins and losses on my stat sheet here, but they've got goals against average, and seven. Yes, 7.
I remember like it was yesterday.
What do you remember about that experience?
Well, I remember, Pete Peters was my junior goaltending partner, and I was 20, he was 18, but I was I was 1A, he was 1B. But we got in the playoffs. I ended up playing, and then I went on to my career, and about I remember about 3 years later, we're playing the Maine Mariners, which was Philadelphia's farm team, and there's this guy skating around, got Peters on the back of his jersey. I'm like, that can't be Pete. And I tried to get closer and I realized it was Peters. And then Pete went on to he was one of the best goaltenders of the National Hockey League. He played with Philadelphia Flyers, played with the Boston Bruins. And I remember spending like 5 years in the American Hockey League, and I was having a really good year. I think that year I made the second team All-Star in the American Hockey League. It's about December. Hartford is a struggling team, and I can remember getting the call. I'm going up to Hartford Saturday night. Hartford is playing Washington, and there was 2 bad teams. And the goalie for Hartford was John Garrett. So John was the starter. I was on the bench. John's now on TV with the Vancouver Canucks TV. So we played Saturday night. We lost 7-3. John was in goal. Jumped on the bus from Hartford. We played the New York Rangers on a Sunday night. Getting dressed, and I kind of had an inkling I might get an opportunity that night. And it's getting dressed, and Larry Plows, the assistant coach, he comes in and says, Ken, the head coach Don Blackburn would like to see in his office. Well, that walk, my heart was going 100 miles an hour. I knew it was getting. He said, how you feeling? You're getting the start tonight, and I played 5 years of pro. You've played your entire life for this opportunity, and I can remember after the first period, we're down 1-0. They had 16 shots on goal, and I thought to myself, I finally made them. Pete Peters, my old goaltending partner, he's one of the top 2 or 3 goaltenders in the National Hockey League. So I kind of think, I'm in now. I'm in the league. And I remember sitting there in the first intermission thinking, I finally made the National Hockey League. And in the second period, they got 21 shots. They scored 5 goals. We're down 6-1 going into the third period. And I can remember sitting there in the second intermission thinking, Ken, you're never going to play in the National Hockey League ever again. Make sure you really enjoy the third period. And I can remember in the third period, Nick Fotiu came down and wired one and went over the net, hit the glass, broke the glass. They brought out the ladders. We're in Madison Square Garden. I love Bernie Prawn. I put my mask off like I saw Bernie on TV all those years. And they had the ladders, they're fixing the glass. And I gave me 5 more minutes of my day in my time in the spotlight. And we lost 7-3, and then bust back to Hartford. I think a couple of days later, they sent me back to Binghamton, and thinking, probably might never get another chance again. And then, I think 3 years later, as I signed with Detroit, I got to play in 2 or 3 games. I think I played 4 NHL games in my career, but certainly that my first NHL game, I'll never forget. It was you play your whole life for that opportunity.
And to take that a step further, not only do you get that, but you get to play in, what is it? I think they call it the world's most famous arena. Were you in awe of Madison Square Garden at that point? Again, playing in Binghamton, you're playing in probably some buildings, but you're not playing in
Madison
Square Garden. Do you remember sort of being in awe of that experience?
Yeah, it was just massive. Like it was so. Vernon Civic Arena, Medicine Hat. Now, the rinks that we played in, like, Kamloops was the old Kamloops Arena. It was the old Kelowna Arena, and it was, New Westminster. The arenas in the Western Hockey League, they're not the new ones that there are now. It was all the old rinks. So, you're to go all of a sudden to be in Madison Square Garden. What a famous rink. And then on that Hartford team, Gordie Howe was on that team. I played with Mark Howe, Marty Howe. I played with the minors. Marty went up and down. I think Dave Keon was on that team. I love Dave Keon from his days with the Toronto Maple Leafs, watching him on TV. So, the whole thing was a surreal experience for me to be in Madison Square Garden, and Gordie Howe and Dave Keon. I mean, they grew up watching those people on TV, and now you're on the same team in Madison Square Garden. It was just a surreal night.
You mentioned that you end up in the Red Wings system in 83-84. You get, at least on here, it says 3 games, goals against average much better over those 3 games, 4.12. By that point, did you I'm sure you're pretty happy to get the opportunity to play a couple more games of NHL. What happened with the mindset? Was a little bit different after a couple years had gone by, and you get an opportunity again to I'm going
to make a little sidebar there. As you're spelling out my goals against average, I've always said if you want to create more goals in hockey, all we got to do is make a rule that the goalies are 5'10" or smaller, and then there's lots of space, and there's got to be I remember about I was with the Detroit Red Wings. I don't know, 8-10 years ago, and we played Tampa Bay, and Bishop was, I remember coming out of the locker room with Chris Draper, and I said, Bishop was there, and I think the other his partner one was 6'5", and one was 6'7", and I said to Chris Draper, I said, look at the size of me. I said, the goalies were the size of me when I played. Look at the goalies today, and goalies are, now being in the draft, if you're a 6-footer, it's hard even to get drafted. So at the end of the day, the goals, there was lots of goals back. But if you had a goals against average around 3, I mean, you were in any league, you were cooking. But I ended up after I signed with the Detroit Red Wings as a free agent. They were looking for a minor league goaltender. Played 2 years there. I got called up again halfway. My first year in training camp in Detroit was Steve Eisenman's very quick. I remember this guy skating around. He had all these funny letters on his name, and he had the puck the whole time. He was a little wee guy. He was in training camp. Boy, is this guy ever good? Well, obviously he was the 4th pick in the draft. It turned out to be one of the greatest Red Wings in the history of the franchise. And I went to America. I went to Adirondack, and sometime during the year there was. I remember in the system was Eddie Mio, Corrado Mikulev, myself. One or two, we got up, and I got called up for about 3 weeks, and I think I got into 3 games. I remember played against Toronto. Greg Stephan, he started, he got sick 8 minutes in. I played an afternoon game. I think I played St. Louis one night. It was 6-6. We were up 6-3 with that doomed me there. We were up 6-3 with about 8 minutes to go, and they scored 3 goals in the last 8 minutes and turned a 6-3 win into a 6-6 tie. Shortly thereafter, I remember going back to my hotel room, and the little red light on the phone was beeping. It was going up and down, and it was a message. And I picked up the phone. Please call Coach Nick Plano. I called Nick Plano. He said, we're going to send you back to Glens Falls. So, but the 2 years in Glens Falls, again, gave me an opportunity to get into the Red Wing organization, and my coach was Bill Dineen. And Bill lived in the apartment complex. And after my 2 years in Adirondack, Detroit Red Wings, Jim DeVilano was looking for a scout, and Bill Dineen pushed hard for the Red Wings, Jim DeVilano and Neil Smith, to hire me as a scout. So certainly my 2 years with the Adirondack Red Wings were huge in my own career.
And it's interesting. So you wrap up your playing career in 84-85. Essentially you get your year in Vernon in 73-74. So we're talking a 10, 11, 12-year window, and that sort of puts a nice bow in it. When you sort of look back at your playing career, obviously it helped you get where you were, but how much fun was it to be a hockey player? And again, coming from a relatively small town like Vernon, it's probably back then smaller than it is today. how fun was it? You've had clearly experiences just in your playing days that people would kill for.
Well, it was so fun. And you're playing for the love of the game. Like, my first year I said I made $275 a week. I think it turned out to be $6,600. My second year pro, I made $9,500. My third year pro, I made $11,500. My fourth year pro, I made $12,000. My fifth year pro, I made $17,500. My sixth year pro, I made $17,500. I think my ninth year pro, I made $30,000, $25,000 and $30,000. So you're playing for the love of the game, but and you're chasing a dream. When you're in those leagues, we're all hoping and waiting for the coach to tell us that you're getting the call up to go play in the National Hockey League. So, but it was so fun. You're playing in the, I think at that time, again, you don't know enough about Europe, but it's probably regarded as the second best league in North America for sure. I mean, there was no IHL. The IHL was cut below. So you're playing against lots of players that go play in the National Hockey League, kids on the way up. Met a lot of friends. I spent of my 9 years, 6 years were in Binghamton, New York. 1 year was in Springfield, and 2 years were in Glens Falls, New York. And actually, after my 9 years of pro, and I got hired or offered the job as the Red Wings Western Canada scout by Jim DeVillano for $30,000. About a week later, John Paddock called. He was the coach and manager of the Hershey Bears of the American League. And I made $30 my last year in the American League, and Jim DeVillano said, we're going to give you $30 to be the scout of the Red Wings. And after I accepted the Red Wing job, 10 days, 2 weeks later, the phone rings. It's John Paddock, and he offered me a job, $35,000 to be the number one goalie for the Hershey Bears. It's 30 or 35, and you love playing hockey. And I said, John, can you give me 2-3 days? He said, yeah. And I just thought about, if I go back and play next year, I'll be looking for a job. And this scouting job was an opportunity. So I called John Paddock and said I've decided to retire and take this Western job. But it was a hard call because you're 29 years old. You still think you got lots of hockey left in you. And Hershey is a legendary American Hockey League town. Had a great hockey history. They had great crowds on the weekends. So it was from 20 to 30. Those 10 years playing professional hockey. Then in the summertime, again, you didn't make enough money in the summertime. My wife's a nurse. In the summertime, we'd come back to either Medicine Hat or Vernon. And we'd, at the first part, early in my 20s, we'd come back to Medicine Hat. Cindy would work at the hospital, and I would work on some of the, these companies. We'd go out and out in the prairies and fix fences as they're doing drilling for gas wells. And then we came to Vernon from 25 to 30 in the summer. Cindy worked at the hospital here in Vernon, and I got a job with at the liquor store, stocking shelves and working at the liquor store. So you didn't make enough money playing hockey to live all year, but we loved our life. We loved our lifestyle, and I loved playing hockey, and it was so fun.
You end up spending 2 years as the Western scout, at least 1 year. It says 2 here as just a scout with the Red Wings. It obviously takes an eye for talent. Was there something that sort of, set you apart or drew you to that? Once you're into it, obviously the rest of your resume speaks for itself. But, you have to get started. How assessing players, what was that process like for you to go from a player to be assessing, some of your former peers?
Yeah. Well, when I retired, I was the Western scout for 4 years. And then in 1989, Neil Smith, who was the chief amateur scout for the Red Wings, became the general manager of the New York Rangers. That would be the first time for me personally. Inside, I thought, wow, somebody this close to me. Neil and I were really close in age. Neil's probably 2 or 3 years older than me. We worked side by side for 4 years. He was the chief amateur scout for the Red Wings. I was the Western scout. He'd come out west, we'd go to games. I'd go out east, we'd go to games. And then all of a sudden he became the general manager of the New York Rangers. That's the first time I said to myself, boy, if I can stick at this thing, maybe somewhere down the road, build up a resume, maybe you can get an opportunity. In 1989, after 4 years as Western scout, I became chief amateur scout. I did that for 5 years. And then I moved to Detroit in 94 and became the assistant manager for 3 years. And from that was like going to Harvard for me. I got to work in the office every day with Jim Devellano, who'd been in the business for like 30 years, been with the New York Islanders, and Scotty Bowman. And every day you're working with Scotty Bowman and Jim Devellano, and you're listening to them talk and think and how they work. That was going to Harvard. That was going to university for me, prepared me to become the manager in 1997. So I would say to you, when I retired in 1985 and became, you go to the games. And I remember Neil Smith flew out, the chief scout, and spent the first 10 days with me. He just went to the games and just showed me the routine. And, you did your reports. And I mean, it wasn't laptops. You do handwritten reports. And then after about a week, you put them in a manila envelope and you'd put your expenses in there and you'd mail them into Detroit. And somewhere down the road, 3 weeks down the road, the check would come back in the mail reimbursing your expenses. It was a different time. And then, you worked on your lists and I've got lots of players that we drafted I'm real proud of, and I got lots of skeletons, players that you really liked that didn't pan out. It's, you're trying to project, guess at an 18-year-old's future. And I've got 4 kids, and they all lived in the basement, or down in the hall. And I had a hard time predicting their future. Never mind trying to go to a rink and sit 35 rows up in the corner and predict somebody else's future. So it's not an exact science. Obviously, you're looking for talent, but after you get talent, it's the determination, the passion, the sacrifice, all the intangibles that quite often separate who makes it and who doesn't make it.
And that's a really interesting thing. Obviously, easy to look back and say that, but at the time, the Red Wings had a heck of a reputation of getting guys late in drafts. A little easier to strike gold with earlier round picks, but we're talking about guys like, and I'm sure you field questions about this all the time, the Zetterbergs, the Datsyuks, just to name a couple off the top of my head, guys that were quite late and turned into potential Hall of Famers or superstars with your organization. Was there anything that sort of stood out about those guys when you got a chance to watch them live? Was there something that drew you to them, and maybe any late round pick that you struck with?
Well, first off, as a manager, it's about the people you hire. So I can't scout everybody and be in the office and work with the owner and be available for the media and go to your farm team. So I had lots of really good people working for me with the Detroit Red Wings. And Jim Nill, Jim Nill and I played junior together in Medicine Hat Tigers, and he was my assistant manager, now the general manager of the Dallas Stars. And, up until 97, I ran the draft. When I moved to Detroit in 1994, for those 3 years in the office, working with Scotty Bowman and Jim Devellano, I had 2 responsibilities: run the amateur draft and run the farm team. Sign the entry-level contracts, build the farm team, and make sure that our young players had a place to play. They developed, and then in 1997, when I became manager, I hired Jim Nill, and he took on that responsibility. So the Zetterbergs and the Datsyuks are really the people that I hired that were out in the field. We had a really good European scout, Håkan Andersson. Now, we hired him in Detroit in 1989. When Neil Smith left, our European scout went with him. And I'd like to, I'd go over to Europe and as the chief scout, and I'd spend lots of time with Håkan the first 2-3 years. Here's what we're looking for. And bringing him over and trying to, in effect, training him. So I'd like to think that Zetterberg and Datsyuk, Håkan Andersson drafted them. But I'd like to think that the time that Håkan spent with myself, with Jim Nill, coming over and kind of getting a feel, he understood the types of players we were looking for, hockey sense, competitiveness, and so it's not one person. I think in the early 90s, Chris Osgood in the 3rd round. Those are the people I saw. Those people, and I made the selection on those people. Later on, as you go, when I became manager, it's the people that you've hired that you trust.
You're an assistant general manager when you win your first Stanley Cup, 97, I believe. What was that like? I mean, that's got to be a feather on the cap at the time you're the assistant general manager. You guys win the Stanley Cup in what would be back-to-back, but that's as much of a dream, I'm sure it is, to be a player and win it, but to be a part of an organization and see it culminate the way it did. Sort of walk us through the gratification that comes from all that hard work and sacrifice and working back at liquor stores and all of the things you did to get there. And now you get a chance to win a Stanley Cup.
Well, obviously the Red Wings hired me in 85. We won the Cup in 97. So 4 years Western Scout, 5 Chief, 3. It's 12 years as a Red Wing. And in the early 90s, lots of disappointments. Losing in the first round in 94 to San Jose. We had, I think, 35 more points than them in the regular season. They knocked us out in 7 games. And I remember losing Game 7 against Toronto in overtime. We were up 3-2, and they beat us in overtime. Nikolai Borishevsky scored in overtime to knock us out. So 1995, we go 12-2 in the first 3 rounds. We get to the Stanley Cup Finals. We think it's finally our time, and we get swept by the New Jersey Devils, and they win. You watch them celebrate, and you're starting to wonder. 1996, we set the all-time record. I think Tampa Bay tied it last year. The all-time record at that time was the all-time record for regular season wins. I think it was 61 or 62 regular season wins. Hardly lost. I think we were 4-1 after 9 games and hardly lost the rest of the season. You went to the rink, you knew you were going to win, you just didn't know what the score was going to be like. That's when Scotty Bowman put together the Russian 5. We had the puck the whole winter, and Tisov and Fedorov, and we started to play, we had the puck, and now you lose in round 3 to Colorado, and then they beat Florida in the finals, and they win the Stanley Cup. So when we did win the Cup in 1997, it was unreal because there was so many disappointments, so many, you thought in the early 90s, in the 89 draft, I was Neil Smith's last draft as the chief scout of the Red Wings before he went to New York. The first round we drafted Mike Sillinger, who played 1,000 games, but he played a bunch of games for Detroit before he left. Second round, Bob Bugner. Third round was Nick Lidstrom. Fourth round was Sergei Fedorov. Sixth round was Dallas Drake, and 11th round was Vladimir Konstantinov. We got 6 NHL players out of the one draft, and I don't know if Vladdy wouldn't have got hurt. Probably would have been a Hall of Famer. Lidstrom, Fedorov, and Vladdy, possibly 3 Hall of Famers. That was a different time because nobody drafted Russians high because of and then 91, 92, those players started to join us, and we had this was a tremendous, added to Yzerman, and you had this tremendous team, and then you had all your first round losses, and then you started to go, and then you think you finally got it figured out, and you lose to New Jersey, and then you come back and you win 62 games, and then you lose to Colorado. So when we won the Cup in 97, it was unreal. I remember we winning at Joe Louis Arena and confetti's coming. It was surreal. And you see Steve Yzerman raising the Stanley Cup. It was surreal. We go to the parade, and you're going down on a float, and there's 1 million people on the streets. I don't know. They're 8 and 10 and 12 deep, and it goes on for a mile. And then there's 400,000 people in a square as we have the rally. It was surreal. It was unbelievable. But certainly all those disappointments probably were the stepping stones, the growing pains, the getting us ready to eventually be ready to win in 1997. So I learned a ton through. You need multiple chances, and you got to keep at it. You keep tweaking your team, and you keep and some of the people that those disappointments that Steve Yzerman and Lidstrom were a factor in being us to be ready in 97, 98, and 02 to win the Stanley Cup.
You've won a number of Stanley Cups, but you've also been a part of Team Canada. Talk about that experience and what that was like for you. Again, it's great the work that you did with the Red Wings, but now you're doing it on a national platform. I imagine similar to constructing an NHL team, this one has got to have so many different intangibles to it for a smaller tournament. You've got access to the best players of your country. What it mean to you to be selected as assistant general manager, and the winning of some gold medals?
Well, my start with Hockey Canada was in the work stoppage year in 04-05. That May of 05, there was no NHL season. We had to put together a team. Bob Nicholson was the head of Hockey Canada. He's now the president of the Edmonton Oilers. He called and asked if I would become an assistant general manager. I can't remember who the general manager was in '05. And we went and, put the team together, called people. And, I remember Marty Brodeur and was on the team. And we lost. We won the silver medal. I think we lost to somebody, or did we win? I can't remember. I think we won silver. Then the next year in '05, '06, we come out of the work stoppage. They asked me to be the general manager, and I, that for me was, putting a team together. And I remember Red Wings. We lost to in the first round of Edmonton. I got Brendan Shanahan to be on the team. He was sort of the elder statesman. He was the captain, and we had lots of the young kids. Sidney Crosby was on the team, and I think Seabrook, but there was lots of those younger players that had been the World Junior team about 3 years earlier had got all these players, and many of these were on the team. So that was sort of my first opportunity. And then Steve Yzerman was named the general manager of the Olympic team in 2009 for the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. And Steve was the working for the Red Wings. He was a senior advisor, and he was in training to become a general manager. And Steve came in my office one day, closed the door, and said, "Ken, they've asked me to be the general manager of the Olympic team. Would you be an assistant?" I said, it'd be an honor to work with you, Steve, to help put together Canada's Olympic team. So, obviously part of the team putting together 2010 Olympic team. We won gold. And then Steve didn't want to do the job in 2014. Doug Armstrong took the job. And then it was part of the 2014 team in Sochi. And then 2016, part of Canada's the tournament, the World Cup tournament in Toronto, putting that team together. So certainly representing, to be even just a small part, it was a different experience. I remember going to Vancouver and being part of the Canadian Olympic team. And we didn't stay in the Athletes Village. We stayed at a hotel downtown, and the managers, we would go together to the rink and walk and just hang out for 2 weeks. You build up relationships and you gather information and meet people that again, go for your lifetime. And then in 2014 in Sochi, we stayed in the Olympic Village, and Steve Yzerman were in this little shoebox of a room with 2 little single beds, and across the hall was Peter Chiarelli and Doug Armstrong, and we'd sit up late at night and have hot stoves and sitting, and you'd have all the curling was on, and the other hockey, there was Olympic sports on, and we would sit there and watch and talk, and then wake up in the morning and go over to the Athletes Village where they had for food. And it was 2 weeks there. It was an incredible experience. So I've been very fortunate through hockey to have some incredible experiences, and those were representing Canada at the Olympics in Vancouver and Sochi were special times.
I'm going to put you on the spot, and Stanley Cup, Olympic gold. Was the celebration different? Was the gratification a little bit different? Obviously, both pretty significant accomplishments that not everybody gets an opportunity to be a part of. You've had a chance to sort of celebrate both. Are they comparable, or are they just completely different in the gratification?
Well, they're different because one's 2 weeks and one's 8 months, and the 2-week tournament, they're every game's a game 7. Where in the Stanley Cup, you got to play for 2 weeks to get to game 7, and you got to win that, and then you got to go. But I think that the experience for me in Vancouver, being a Canadian, being a British BC boy, to be in Vancouver, to represent your country, all my family was there. My mom was alive at the time. She lived in Vernon. My sister lives in Victoria. They were coming to some games, to be around my family, to see Crosby scored the goal in overtime, and you win. Like it was an incredible memory. To be the general manager of a Stanley Cup team is also and when you win gold medal, you celebrate with the country. The whole of Canada is celebrating. Certainly, when you accomplish that with a team, your fan base and are celebrating. So, they're similar, but they're different. Just because one's quick. Like one, you come in, you put a team together, and you play 2-3 games, and then you get it. You know, I remember in Vancouver, we lost on a Sunday night in the round robin to USA. So they advanced, and we had to play. I think we played Germany on a Tuesday, or and now you're into elimination games. Tuesday was Germany. We won that. Wednesday was Russia. It was Canada-Russia Wednesday night, and we won that. We advanced. I think Friday was Slovakia, and Sunday the gold medal against USA. But it was 4 game sevens: Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. It's 4 games. Lose and go home. We won all 4 games. So it's a big game. It's a big event every night. Where in the NHL, you got to build. Starts in September, and you build your team, and you do all the planning in the summertime, and it's and the building of that team probably takes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years from the draft and build, and people come on and you trial and error and make changes. Where the Olympic team, you're getting to pick the best of the best, and they're in the prime of their career, and every country is picking the very best hockey players that they've got in the world and putting together every country's all-star team, and then going out and going head to head over the course of 2 weeks. So it's two different experiences, but two obviously incredible. To win gold in the Olympics and to be part of that, and small part. Obviously, my role with Detroit was bigger, because I'm the manager. Where here you're the assistant manager, but it's also we pick the players, and then it's up to the coaching staff to fit it all together.
Obviously, this year seems to be a little bit different. This is your first season with the Edmonton Oilers. How does this pandemic and the bubble sort of affect what you guys are doing as a whole? How has it changed the way? You've done business a certain way, the same way, as long as possible. Now there's a pretty significant wrinkle. What sort of challenges does a management team and an administration group have to go through?
Well, obviously the world has changed for everybody, starting in the middle of March. I can remember going to general managers meetings in early March down in Florida, and Gary Bettman, talking about the cap, which was 81.5, was going to go somewhere between 84 and 88. And, all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, our every business is shut down. The whole world was shut down for a period of time, and even now we're now coming out of. I think the league has done an unbelievable job with the Players Association, getting our playoffs in these 2 bubbles: the bubble in Toronto, the bubble in Edmonton. I think the games are great. I was in the bubble for 2 weeks, a week leading up, and then the week while we played Chicago. You felt safe. You got tested every day. There was no lines. It was organized. The food was. It was a great experience, and I think the NHL's done. Should be applauded, along with the Players Association, for working together to get our game up and running. And we're going to have a Stanley Cup champion here sometime in September. So obviously, now the business has changed. It's more Zoom calls. We had our year-end Zoom amateur meetings, I think, in May for a week, and I've had Zoom Pro Scout meetings. I'm going to have more Zoom Pro Scout meetings in September, early September, leading up to our off season, which our off season probably is going to be in October. It's a different world, but it's a different world for everybody, where everybody's dealing with the challenges of how this pandemic has affected our world, and your own world, and your industry, and everything. So. I'm excited about the opportunity in Edmonton. I've been in Detroit for 36 years. I've been a manager in Detroit for 21 years. Very proud of everything we accomplished there. At the end, we missed the playoffs 3 years in a row, and I just knew it was, the standards, the bar was set high. It was, you can beat Father Time for so long, but eventually Father Time wins, and the Red Wings were going into rebuild mode, and Steve Yzerman had stepped down in Tampa Bay, and I had a great relationship with Steve, and I'm happy that I was able to hand the keys to Steve Yzerman, who I've got a tremendous relationship, and he'll do a fabulous job. You look at the job that he did in building Tampa Bay into being one of the elite teams in the league, and in time. I'm sure he'll do the same in Detroit. And then I got, as I stepped aside in Detroit, Bob Nicholson reached out to me, and they were looking for a general manager in Edmonton. And I'm thrilled to be back in Western Canada to manage, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, a hockey team that's got a passionate fan base and a tremendous history going back into the 80s and early 90s with the Gretzkys and the Messiers and the Currys and the Coffeys and the Fuhrs. And certainly we're trying to build the Oilers into a team that can legitimately compete for the Stanley Cup. I thought we made good progress this year. Very disappointed that we went out the play-in round to Chicago. I thought that they were a veteran. They're people that have been through as we talked here half an hour ago about the Red Wings. The Taze's and Crawford and Keith were you could see their Stanley Cup pedigree in that playoff series. And I'm hoping that it was a learning opportunity for us, and somewhere down the road, much like we talked about the Red Wings, all the losses of the early 90s, hopefully this is going to be some stepping stone for down the road that when you need multiple opportunities, and somewhere down the road you want to be the last team standing. So I'm very grateful and thankful for the opportunity that Bob Nicholson and Daryl Cates have given me here in Edmonton, and hopefully I can repay them by making some decisions to help the Oilers grow into a legit contender.
Well, yeah, I don't think this makes a huge impact to you, but my 6-year-old is and his best friend are the biggest Connor McDavid fans. So needless to say, in my household, even though I'm BC born and raised, you've got lots of Oilers supporters at a nice young age. Ken, as we wrap this thing up, and I really appreciate the time, what an amazing story from a 5'8" goaltender in Vernon minor hockey to an Olympic gold medal winner and 4-time Stanley Cup winner. Maybe just wrap up and what it meant to you to grow up in Vernon and how a community like that, and the hockey community that it has gone through and become. I'm sure you've kept an eye on how the Vipers organization's done over those years as well. What did it mean to you to be a part of this community and at the time a hockey team, and how it groomed you to become obviously one of the most prolific names in hockey?
Well, I guess, I've had the opportunity. I've been a lot of places in the world. I've been all across Canada and the U.S. and lots in Europe. And, I'm in my early 60s, and, Vernon's home. Vernon, so I probably could have chose lots of places. Vernon's home. Obviously, when I work in Detroit, when I work in Edmonton, I've got a place there and I've got roots there. But at the end of the day, when I retire, a good chunk of my time is going to be spent in Vernon. I think it's one of the great, the Okanagan, I think is the best area in Canada. I'm biased, grew up here, and growing up in Vernon, great people, wonderful little community. It's got everything year round for different sporting events and lots going on. And I think it's a great place to raise children. And from a hockey standpoint, obviously, having the Vernon Tier 2 team is a wonderful opportunity for young men that they're chasing their dream, and their dream is to play college hockey, or their dream is to play in Vernon and go on to maybe play major junior, or like I was, maybe you just want to play at the highest level you can for as long as you can, and then eventually we get into our 20s and we gotta earn a living and have a job. But Vernon provides the Tier 2 BC Hockey League, the Alberta Hockey League, the Saskatchewan. It provides so many opportunities for so many young hockey players pursuing their dream, and that's what the Vernon Vikings did for me, and I'm sure that it's done that for lots of people. I still, when I run Detroit Red Wings, I'm still, every now and then when I would talk to my mom used to be a season ticket holder. She passed this past winter, but up until about 3 years ago, she was a season ticket holder. she had 2 tickets to the Vernon team for, I don't know, 20 years, and she'd have some friends pick her up, and she'd always bring a friend with her, and she had seats there, and she'd go to the Vernon games all the time. I'd say, Mom, how's Vernon doing? And, oh, they're doing great. And then, oh, they're struggling. And I'd get a report from her. My brother Dennis obviously lives in Vernon, and he scouts for the Dallas Stars. So, I'll talk to Dennis and how's Vernon doing. I always try to keep tabs on how the Vernon team is doing, because it's home. It's home, and I know that the Vernon team is important to the local community. So the city of Vernon, Vernon Civic Arena, all the people, the John Zaharas and my dad with all minor hockey, gave me an opportunity to pursue my dream. The Vernon Vikings gave me an opportunity to get to Medicine Hat, and everyone's a stepping stone. So Vernon's home. Love it here, and gave me an opportunity to pursue my passion and my dream.
Ken, we know you're extremely busy. Thank you so much for not shunning me when we happened to run in by accident at the dry cleaners earlier or last week. We really appreciate the time. Thank you so much. All the best with the Oilers moving forward. Again, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Graham.